What if the Cold War's most insane ideas actually worked? Imagine, for a moment, orbital bomb platforms circling Earth, ready to strike any target in minutes. Underground missile trains hiding beneath Siberian permafrost. Weather weapons turning droughts into strategic tools. These weren't science fiction. They were deadly serious military proposals that came terrifyingly close to reality. Welcome to the edge of Armageddon. The year is 1962. American and Soviet strategists are locked in a contest where second place means nuclear annihilation. Mutually assured destruction, MAD-E, has become doctrine, an acronym so perfectly descriptive it sounds like dark comedy. Both superpowers possess enough nuclear weapons to end human civilization multiple times over. But that's not enough. In the twisted logic of Cold War thinking, having the power to destroy the world once leaves you vulnerable. You need redundancy. You need delivery systems your enemy can't counter. You need weapons so unprecedented that even contemplating them provides strategic advantage. What emerged from this paranoid brilliance were proposals that sound like rejected James Bond plots, except they were real, funded, and in some cases partially built. Project Zeus began in the late 1950s as America's answer to a terrifying question. How do you guarantee nuclear retaliation if your ground-based missiles are destroyed in a surprise attack? The solution was simple and horrifying. Put nuclear weapons in orbit. Satellites armed with warheads circling overhead, immune to ground assault, capable of striking anywhere on Earth within minutes. The bombs wouldn't fall from aircraft that could be shot down or launched from silos that could be targeted. They'd already be overhead waiting. The technical challenges were immense. Getting nuclear weapons into stable orbit required rockets powerful enough to lift substantial payloads, but reliable enough that failures wouldn't rain radioactive material across friendly territory. Keeping them operational in the harsh environment of space, extreme temperature fluctuations, radiation, micrometeorite impacts, demanded engineering that barely existed, and the political implications were staggering. Ground-based missiles could be monitored, their numbers verified through reconnaissance. Orbital weapons were invisible, uncountable, potentially unlimited. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 banned nuclear weapons in orbit, but not before both superpowers had invested heavily in the concept. Declassified documents reveal that prototype systems reached advanced development stages. American engineers designed re-entry vehicles that could strike from orbit with accuracy comparable to ICBMs. Soviet planners created response scenarios, assuming the United States would deploy orbital bombs regardless of treaties. The weapons were never deployed, but the capability was proven. The future where nuclear weapons patrolled overhead came within a political decision of reality. While Americans looked skyward, Soviets looked to their vast rail network. The RT-23 Molodets, NATO designation SS-24 Scalpel, was an intercontinental ballistic missile designed to launch from specially modified railway cars indistinguishable from ordinary freight trains. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Ground-based missile silos were fixed targets. Satellites could photograph them, targeting coordinates could be calculated, and a surprise first strike could theoretically destroy them before they launched. But a missile hidden in a train moving through thousands of miles of Soviet railway? That was impossible to target. Between 1987 and 2005, these missile trains operated across the Soviet Union and later Russia. Each train carried 3 missiles with 10 independently targetable warheads each. 30 nuclear weapons moving silently through Siberian forests, across the Urals, past industrial cities, completely invisible to satellite surveillance. Railway schedules became classified military secrets. Innocent-looking freight trains might be carrying enough destructive power to obliterate 30 cities. The psychological impact on NATO military planners was profound. How do you strategize against weapons you can't find? The trains had weaknesses. They required specialized rail infrastructure that limited operational flexibility. They were vulnerable during the days when they sat stationary for maintenance. And the cost of maintaining entire fleets of mobile ICBM platforms eventually became unsustainable. But for nearly 2 decades, they represented one of the Cold War's most successful implementations of strategic unpredictability. America's answer to the problem of vulnerable fixed installations took a stranger direction: underground. The proposed mole tank concept, well, it envisioned armoured vehicles capable of tunnelling through soil and rock, creating mobile underground bases for missiles, command centres, or sabotage operations deep in enemy territory. Engineering studies explored nuclear-powered boring machines that could create tunnel networks faster than they could be detected. The vehicle would surface only to attack, then disappear back underground before retaliation. The technical hurdles were honestly absurd. Boring through solid rock at any practical speed requires enormous energy and creates seismic signatures detectable at great distances. Navigation underground without GPS was nearly impossible. The heat generated by boring mechanisms would create thermal signatures visible to infrared satellites, and the cost, preliminary estimates suggested that each vehicle would cost more than an aircraft carrier. The concept remained in theoretical studies, never progressing beyond paper designs and small-scale excavation tests. But the fact that serious engineers spent years studying it reveals just how desperate the search for invulnerable weapons platforms had become. Then there were the environmental weapons. Project Storm Fury explored hurricane modification. Could you steer tropical storms toward enemy coastlines? Cloud seeding research investigated whether you could trigger droughts in Soviet agricultural regions or floods in industrial areas. The science was questionable, the ethics worse, but research programs received funding and conducted field tests. In 1977, the Environmental Modification Convention banned weather warfare, implicitly acknowledging that multiple nations had explored making it operational. Psychological operations ventured into territory that frankly sounds like conspiracy theory, but appears in declassified documents. Projects investigated low-frequency sound weapons that could induce fear or nausea. There was research into subliminal messaging delivery systems. Studies on chemical compounds that might enhance interrogation effectiveness. Most of these projects concluded that the proposed effects were either scientifically implausible or so unreliable as to be militarily useless, but they were investigated seriously with government funding and classified research programs. What stopped these weapons wasn't sudden moral awakening. It was cost, technical impossibility, and the recognition that some escalations made everyone less safe. Orbital nuclear weapons increased first strike temptation by reducing response time to minutes. Weather warfare risked uncontrollable feedback effects. Underground mobile weapons were economically absurd. Each proposal, examined closely, revealed flaws that made traditional weapons more effective. But the concepts themselves had strategic value. If your enemy believes you might deploy orbital bombs or weather weapons, they must allocate resources to counter those threats. Intelligence agencies had to investigate, military planners had to develop responses. Scientific communities had to assess feasibility. The weapons didn't need to exist to shape policy. The possibility was enough. In 2025, we face similar dynamics with different technologies: autonomous weapons, cyber warfare capabilities, artificial intelligence-guided military systems. The same questions arise. What becomes possible when technology advances? What should be built versus what can be built? Where do we draw lines between strategic advantage and existential risk? The Cold War's abandoned superweapons teach a critical lesson. Technical capability doesn't determine what gets built. Economics, politics, ethics, and recognition of mutual vulnerability constrain even the most advanced military powers. The weapons that almost existed remind us that restraint isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing preventing catastrophe. If this journey to the edge of technological madness revealed how close humanity came to deploying weapons that could have ended everything, subscribe to Through Time. Share this with someone who needs to understand that the future we avoided matters as much as the history we lived. The weapons were never built, but the choices that stopped them still echo in every decision we make about what to create and what to leave undone.